Ever wondered how a single phone call can flip a family's world upside down, even if nothing's ever proven? Today, we're digging into Virginia's Child Protective System and the stories most people never hear.
I'm Jamie from Jamie Nonprofit, and I'm passionate about ending the stigma around domestic violence. This episode is going to be tough, but necessary because when child welfare goes wrong, the impact ripples out in ways that are hard to imagine.
So here's our promise. You'll hear what actually happens when CPS knocks on the door, how rural counties like Highland County are struggling under incredible pressure, and why we need to rethink how we define neglect, especially when poverty is involved.
We'll talk numbers, real cases, and what recent reforms mean for families, workers, and kids. Stick with us as we pull back the curtain on a system in crisis and search for hope.
Let's start with the sheer scale. Last year alone, Virginia saw over 36,000 child abuse and neglect reports involving more than 53,000 children. But here's the wild part. Only about 13% were ever found to have any merit.
That means thousands of families went through invasive, stressful investigations, interviews, home searches, only to be told the state had zero evidence. It's easy to forget the psychological toll that can take, especially when you know you've done nothing wrong.
Exactly. And all of that starts with a report sometimes made in good faith, other times out of retaliation or misunderstanding. But whether or not anything is substantiated, the process leaves scars.
That's what we hear at Jamie Nonprofit all the time. Families feel like the system sees them as guilty until proven innocent. The data backs it up too. Tens of thousands of cases, most closed with nothing found, but after real trauma is already done.
One thing that stands out is how neglect gets defined. 60% of founded neglect cases are labeled as physical neglect, but so often, that's just code for living in poverty.
Absolutely, and critics point out that instead of offering real support, the system tends to punish parents for being poor. Imagine being accused of neglect because you can't afford better housing or groceries, rather than being offered help.
That actually reminds me of a mom I spoke to in Highland County last year. The only thing CPS could cite was an empty fridge during a tough week. Instead of food assistance, she got an investigation.
Stories like that are way too common. The line between true neglect and poverty is blurry, but the consequences are real kids taken from homes, families torn apart, all because of poverty, not intentional harm.
Zooming in, Highland County's DSS has been under a microscope for years. There was even a state-mandated corrective action plan because of delayed responses to abuse complaints and critical staffing shortages.
I remember reading that at one point, the foster care workers in Highland County were carrying 3 times the recommended caseload. When you've got 45 kids per worker versus the state's cap of 15, things are bound to slip through the cracks.
And it reached a breaking point. No internal staff left. The state sent in emergency social workers from outside just to keep up. The county even had to pay extra out of local taxes because paperwork wasn't getting done for state and federal funds.
That creates a vicious cycle. Overworked staff burnout, families don't get support, more mistakes happen, and trust in the system just evaporates. Fixing that isn't as simple as hiring more people, but it's a start.
Let's talk about real-world impact. In one case, during lockdown, a child witnessed a terrifying assault at home strangulation, no less. But even with clear evidence, the system spun in the wrong direction.
Instead of protecting the victim, the focus turned to retaliation and removing the child based on allegations that were ultimately proven false. But by then, trauma had compounded for that family. CPS didn't even follow up with proper checks or interviews.
Exactly. When the system fails to acknowledge violence in front of a child and then mishandles the aftermath, it sends the message that victims can't trust anyone. That's devastating.
And it's not rare. At Jamie Nonprofit, we see how bureaucratic inertia and bias can make things worse. Families deserve better, especially survivors of domestic abuse who are already fighting to be heard.
Things aren't totally static, though. Highland County's tried to stabilize their DSS by offering bonuses, hiring more staff, and even bringing in full-time attorneys to enforce better legal procedures.
There's also a new initiative rolling out across Virginia: Safe Kids, Strong Families. The idea is to modernize the workforce and improve outcomes for kids and families. But those changes take time, and the risk of more harm is still high if things don't improve fast enough.
And even now, Highland's foster care unit still relies on outside help to get by. It's a reminder of how fragile the system remains, even after years of crisis.
It's a step in the right direction, but the community needs to keep pushing for more like real oversight, trauma-informed practices, and most importantly, listening to families themselves.
Let's wrap with what matters most. First, thousands of children and families are pulled into investigations with no evidence, causing real harm even when cases are unfounded.
Second, poverty and neglect are too often conflated, leading to families being punished instead of supported. And third, staffing crises in places like Highland County make mistakes and tragedies far more likely.
For anyone listening, here's a practical step. Reach out to your local DSS board or county supervisors. Ask about their staffing, training, and what they're doing to ensure bias and burnout don't harm more families.
And if you or someone you know has been affected by a flawed investigation or domestic violence, don't stay silent. Connect with organizations like ours at Jamie Nonprofit. We're here to advocate, and together we can demand better from the system.